can anyone tell me what will be the characteristics? One, I think one of you already told. What is the first and foremost characteristic? First and foremost, the product or service should be, yes, can I complete the sentence? The product or service should be,
Sir, help the consumers.
that is always there. That is there for every business. That is there for every business, because without filling the need of a consumer, no business is going to exist.
To solve the problem.
No, it is there for every business. You take any product. I think one of you already told. You take any product or any service without meeting a consumer requirement or need, it's not going to exist at all, isn't it? Yeah. Yes, yes, come out. Yes, I look at the word in red, innovation. The new product or a service, it can be a service, it can be a product. It's the innovation is the prime feature of any startup. Otherwise, suppose today you want to start a hotel, let us say there are so many restaurants, you also want to go and start up a restaurant. You are in the initial phase. We can't call it a startup. Is it clear? So there must be innovation. Now look at read what the content I have written within brackets. Either a new product or a service or an additional feature or attribute to an existing product. So the product or service itself can be new, which is not in existence as of now, or there can be a product or a service which is already in the market. There are so many players, but you add some feature or some attribute which is totally unique, which changes the product's functionality altogether, right? So the innovation can be either it be totally new or it can be an addition to an existing product, but it is not an incremental addition or a minor addition. The addition should be substantial, so that the way the product functions or the way the service is offered, it totally changes its characteristics. Now look at the list of startups, recent startups in India. Look at that. Now earlier the payments were there, people were making payments in a different way. Now you make it in a different way using Paytm. Look at 1mg, is an online medicine service. Then vegetable service, transportation, education. Look at everyone. Then car service, car rental, furniture. This is custom made furniture, right? Again, food service. Then again, your accommodation. So all these feature, all these services were there already. They were existing 10 years back, but in a different form. In a different form. They were not totally new. That's why I told you the product or service. It is not that it's entirely new. Nothing is entirely new in this, but people are doing it, or the business was being done in a different way, in a different methodology. Is it clear? So if you look, what is the one thing that runs through all of them? If you look at all these, whatever I have given examples, look at the screen and tell me what is the one thing which runs through. There's a common thread which connects all of them. And what has made this possible? Why is that people have gone for so much of service facilities? What is the base for that? Can anyone tell me? Without this facility, people would not have gone for this sort of startup venture. Because of this, these ventures have come. What is that? What is that? What is the technology behind all these things? What is the technology behind all these things?
Online platforms.
Yes, very good. So because of the growth in that, in online platform, we think of, because it opens up a lot of avenues. You see, take any business and you start thinking whether this can be done in a different way using the online platform. That is why if you look at the most of the startups, they all fall into this category, because still there is ample scope, because it changes the way business is being done. That's the reason why online platform provides the base for all service-based startups. So it doesn't mean that a startup should have an online platform at its backbone, as its backbone. It can be products as well. In fact, the products, the main idea of startup is that to improve the economic conditions, products constitute, they play a major role. Let us see some of the product startups. Yes, this I have taken only from the Indian market. One is electric scooter. Look at the technology: eyewear, memory foam, solar panels. So all, if you look at all those products, the products, they fall into the new domains, isn't it? These products were not very much very much present some few years ago, and the technology is totally new. So the products are totally new. Is that clear? So there was a vehicle, scooters were available, but with a different technology, right? Again, mattresses were available, but with a different technology, a different product features. Can anyone tell me what's a memory foam? Has anyone come across the word? Has anyone come across the word memory foam?
So once we lie on it, it will stay like that till something else.
It will. They have
Know your body. So
yes, it knows your what shall I say, the graphics of your body, right? So every minute particle of the mattress, it suits your profile. That's why we use memory foam even in the high quality shoes and sandals. It exactly fits into your profile. Suppose if you wear the shoe or chapel, it exactly fits into the, so that you feel the comfort, right? No portion is left untouched. No portion is left untouched. It's memory foam. Then other things, of course, you know that. Now the last one which I showed you, Torchit. If I think I want all of you to go through this website of Torchit. So this is again an Indian startup where they have developed a lot of gadgets for differently able. I think even if you find time after the session is over, I request all of you to go through this. It's very, very interesting. People who were not able to, taken these snaps, and not taken. People who are not, they have covered differently able, not only from physical disablement, even from sight disablement, voice disablement. So any person who is disabled, how to make, design and offer a product which suits him, which helps him to lead a normal life. Very, very interesting startup. You can go through that. Let us go. Now, that is the first. So if you look at all these things, there is an innovation. Innovation in the first set. Here, the innovation is not in as such of the way the business was already there, but the way in which the business was transacted was different. So they have introduced using online platform. They have changed the methodology of doing business. Here, the product itself is new, or the technology itself is new. So both can fit into the startup category. Can I go ahead? Can I move? Now, so innovation is the backbone. Apart from innovation, there are certain other aspects which distinguish startup from normal business. Let's see what are they. Look at funding, look at risk, look at profit. Now, funding, I say, by venture capitalists. Can anyone elaborate on that? Why is that? First of all, can anyone tell me who is a venture capitalist? From whatever you have learned so far, or even the first year or second year, or both of you there?
Both first year and second year.
Second year. So that means second year must be knowing who is a venture capitalist. Who is a venture capitalist?
Yes, finance students, you may be well aware of venture capitalist, angel investor, finance students.
Sir, angel investor something.
No, there is another name or another form. Now, what do they do? What do
So they believe in your idea, and they take a certain percentage of the equity, and they will wait for the returns.
Very good, very good. Nicely said. So unlike other lenders, a normal lender, let's say a bank or a financial institution, they are interested in projects that are already well proven. So they don't want a share in the equity. So it's purely lending. So they take interest in capital because the project is already known, the product or service is already there in the market. project the earnings, project the income. So they are interested only charging an interest over a period of time and then get back their principal. Now, when the product is totally new, the market is uncertain. That's why the next feature is I have put risk. The risk is high. The chances of the product succeeding, we cannot say it's 100% chance. There can be reasons for which the product may fail, or it may take a very long gestation period. The time required to educate the market may be too long. Till such time, a normal lender cannot wait for his money to recover his money. So there comes the venture capitalist. Once they are convinced about the long run profitability, I use the word long run profitability of a company, of a venture, they pitch in and then they put their funds in it, wait for the returns. So there are different modalities. And mostly they also give the form of a soft loan with a lower interest, but majority is they take a stake in the equity. It's mostly equity based funding. They'll wait for the company to grow. Once the profitability increases, then they dispose of their stake in the market and then come out of the venture. A venture capitalist will not stick to the venture always, because his business is not to become a shareholder or a partner in a business. His objective is to promote a business, wait for some time, then when at the right time take out his money, come out of the business, then look for another venture. So that's their nature itself is to find highly profitable but projects with a long gestation period. Right? That's a second difference between a normal business and a startup. Of course, the third feature is risk, which is uncertain, a lot of uncertainty, so risk high. The third, again, the consequence of that profit may not be available from day one. We may have to wait for months, years, but once it becomes a success, the returns will be substantial. The returns will be substantial. Now here I want to touch upon, suppose what happens if the project fails? What happens if the project fails? I'm talking from the venture capitalist point of view. Will he not be put into a loss? Because he has taken a stake in equity, not as a loan. He has taken a stake in equity. He is an equity shareholder. The project fails. Will he be at a loss? I'm asking about the venture capital. Will he be at a loss if the project fails? Yes.
So, like how we invested in our business, likewise, you would have invested in many other businesses.
Yes. He will, if a project fails, definitely he will end up in a loss. No doubt about it. No doubt about it. So he puts his eggs in too many baskets. Right? That's why he chooses many ventures. Maybe let us assume that 50% of the ventures fail, and whatever money he's put into those 50% ventures, of course it goes waste. He cannot recover them back. But the remaining 50%, they give a return which is more than offset whatever he's lost by way of failure in the 50%. Is it clear? That's why they wait. So it offsets whatever the additional return or the excessive return that they get out of successful projects. It offsets whatever the loss they incurred in certain projects that they have failed. So that is the nature of their business. Fine. We shall move. Yeah. Now, before going to that, in fact, I think how many of you have gone through this? Startup India is a Government of India portal. I request all of you to go through this. In fact, the entire whatever we want to know about startup is there. Everything is there in Startup India. This is a portal meant exclusively for Startup India. And once this, prior to the launch of this portal, startups were there. People were there were many startups coming up. They were following the rules meant for the startups. We will see them. We'll see them now. What are the statutory requirements? That's all. So they will follow the statutory requirements, establish the business, keep running. Now, the government wanted to, cover or bring all these startups in one forum, and then decided to help them in some way or the other, because it's a national priority. So they started this portal of Startup India, where any startup can go and register their presence in the Startup India. Once you, after fulfilling the eligibility conditions, once you register, if your registration is accepted, it means you can call yourself a startup, because there can be small hesitation in the mind of anyone. Can we call ourselves as a startup? Because I may not be aware whether my product is new one, totally new, because somebody else might have already started produce the same product. That the product might be there in the market for some time. Maybe I may not be aware of it. So all those things will get clear once you get your registration approved by Startup India. Let's see what it is. Is this is somewhat slightly vague? Is the screen visible? Is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Okay. Now look at the feature. They are given 5 features. One is age, type, turnover, then original entity, innovativeness. You know what is innovativeness? The product should be, or the service should be totally new. It should offer something which is not being offered by the products or services that are already in the market. Look at the company age. Period of existence and operation should not be exceeding 10 years from the date of incorporation. So what does this mean? Even a company which is, that's why I told this was before the setup of Startup India. There were many startups, so I should bring all of them into the fold. So they gave a span of 10 years, not exceeding 10 years. Any company which is in existence for not more than 10 years, if they fit into the definition, they can go and register. Is that clear? Then type, then next comes type. Can anyone tell me what are the common constitutions or types of companies, legal constitutions? Normally what we come across, 1, 2, 3, 4. Can anyone tell me the type of companies? When I say type, I mean the constitution. We call it constitution, or the legality of a company, or in what way a company gets formed legally. Yes, one is the sole proprietary. Go ahead.
Private means partnership, sir.
Partnership.
Limited liability.
Limited liability partnership, LLP. Then
can be in future made into private limited company.
Private limited. Yes. Let's stop there. Let's not go to public limited. So I can be a sole proprietary, a partnership, or a LLP, a limited liability partnership, or a private limited company. Fine. So here, if you want to call yourself as, if you want to register yourself as a startup in Startup India, it can be either a partnership, or a LLP, or a private limited company. Sole proprietorship is not allowed here. Though as per definition, even a sole proprietary concern can be called a startup. Startup India requires either it to be a partnership, or a LLP, or a private limited company. And out of these 3, the ideal constitution is, can anyone guess what should be the ideal constitution? Yes. The product is totally new. Let us say the service is totally new. The entrepreneur is not financially that much sound. He has got the technology with him, but not the financial resource. Somehow he has tied up the finance. Now he wants to register, or in fact, this happens even before that. What will be the ideal out of these 3? Ignoring I said proprietary is not allowed. Let's say partnership, limited liability partnership, and private limited. Out of these 3, which one will you choose? Suppose you put yourself in the shoes of an entrepreneur. Yeah.
Limited liability will be good.
Why? Yeah, LLP is
because we can share the fundings. If we go through private limited, we need to do, it will be more expensive, and to maintain the books.
The legal formalities are more, and it's not required for you. No,
auditing.
Yeah. That's the reason. So the very big disadvantage of a partnership firm, even before LLP came into, it was allowed in India. LLP was there in other countries long back. Even before introduction of LLP, the partnerships firm's major limitation is the unlimited liability. Right? Partners' liability is unlimited. It's not limited. Someone's mic is on. Yeah. So unlike a private limited company where the liability of the promoters or directors is limited, In a partnership or in a sole proprietary, the liability is unlimited. I think you know what it is, isn't it? Unlimited. In case of any failure, the promoter has to bear the entire loss. He cannot restrict his loss to the extent of money he invested. So that is unlimited liability. So the LLP that removes that difficulty, that disadvantage. So it offers the benefit of a private limited company where the partner's liability is limited. At the same time, you act similar to a private limited company, right? There are many provisions applicable for limited companies are applicable here. You also register with ROC, Registrar of Companies. So LLP is a right mode for initial startups who are in the initial phase. Then come to the next one. Annual turnover should have an annual turnover not exceeding 100 crores. They have given a very big ceiling. The annual turnover should not be more than 100 crores. That is, if it's a too big ceiling, most of the small startups in small scale, they fall in tens or 50s or 50 crores or 10 crore, 5 crore. Because in the initial stage, the annual turnover cannot be more than 100 crores. It won't reach. So that is another requirement. Then entity should not have been formed by splitting up or reconstructing an already existing. This is one other requirement. Suppose you have a proprietary, it must be newly formed. I should not, suppose you have a partnership, right? I cannot say this, there is already a company formed as a partnership company. This would have been registered with the Registrar of Firms because the registering authority is Registrar of Firms. Now I cannot again convert it into an LLP. I have to register afresh LLP. If at all there is a partnership firm, you can dissolve it, then register it as a fresh limited liability partnership firm. It must be, you cannot split or merge anything for constituting a startup. So these are all the requirements, eligibility conditions. If you fulfill all these conditions, then you can go online and register yourself as a startup after fulfilling some other legal formalities, which we are going to now see. Now, what is the advantage? Let's go one by one. I don't want to go rush through. Let's see it. This is what we have so far discussed. An LLP should have at least 2 members, and there is no maximum limit. Look at these. These are very essential points. No maximum limit, but minimum must be 2. Lesser cost of registration. It has got separate existence, similar to your company, separate legal existence, separate from their partners. Of course, limited liability. So these are all the features, I think, which we have already discussed. Let's go. Yeah, if you have a sole proprietary, you have to first close this, then register it as LLP by including some more partners, because the minimum requirement is 2. An LLP can be converted into a private limited company as per the provisions contained in Companies Act 366. Of course, see, when I say legal aspects, any company for that matter, we as an entrepreneur, as a promoter, you must know what are all the major requirements. We cannot go into the specifics, right? We cannot go into the specifics because there are experts, there are people who are doing that job. I cannot do everything. Suppose I say an LLP can be converted into a private limited company under Section 366. It is not that the promoter himself should do this. He cannot. He is not an expert in all such things. So he has to rely upon a legal advisor. So it is always there. But if from your point of view, as a student or as a prospective entrepreneur, you should know what are all the available provisions. Only then I can approach, isn't it? So the idea is to expose you to what are all the available features, right? There will be always a need for relying on taking the services of legal advisor or a company secretary, right? So that is always there. We cannot rule out because their main job is that. So they will be knowing the nuances of their job. Fine. Yes, as I already told you, LLP is registered with the ROC, Registrar of Companies, and similar to private limited company. Before registration, you should check for names. Check for the names available, name availability, because in proprietary there is no such class. You can form any name. There's no common register maintained. to check whether this name is already in existence in anywhere else. But since LLP is, it takes the, acquires the nature of a company, you have to check the availability of name. Even when we go for registration, first thing is you should check for name availability. Then they will authorize you. Wait for some time after your application. They'll say it must be, application should be only online with the MCA, Ministry of Corporate Affairs. Then once they find that there is no such name, you can go ahead. They'll be given a green signal to go ahead with the filing of your application for registration. Suppose the similar name is available, you will be informed that there is a similar name available, and then you may have to make minor modifications so that it should not be the same name. I can have minor changes and then go for a registration. Now, first thing is you check your availability of name with ROC. Then go for, once it is clear, then look at the documents which are required, simple documents. Your ID proof of the partners, right? Your office address, this is required for any registration for that matter. Then I come to digital signature afterwards. Then DPIN, the designated partner, this is the, as far as companies, they call it as DIN, director identification number. Here, designated partner identification number, DPIN. Then of course GST registration. So these are the registration certificates. We should register all these things and then upload these documents with MCA for register. Is it clear? Now let me see. I'll discuss what is this digital signature certificate, and of course DPIN, all these things. Now what is a digital signature certificate? Can anyone tell me? Can anybody has got any idea of a digital signature certificate? Because see, when you say everything is online, your submission of documents, submission of application, is everything is online. Now how will you sign the document? Suppose if you do it physically, you write, you fill up an application, put your signature. The authorized partner, if it is a LLP, there must be an authorized partner. The deed itself should designate one partner as an authorized signatory to sign all documents. That is there even in partnership. But in LLP also it will be there. The so-and-so partner will be a authorized signatory, and whatever, if he signs the documents, it is binding on the company. Fine. Now, if it is a physical mode, you will sign the document physically and submit. When it is an online submission, it's not simply uploading a document, it is signing or authenticating the application, where we cannot take a printout, take a signature and then load it. It is not that way. So there again, this is Ministry of Corporate Affairs. You go and go online, submit an application, upload whatever documents they ask, then they will generate a digital certificate for you, digital signature for you, not digital certificate, digital signature for you. It means it will be similar to a pen drive. They give in a pen drive whatever information that you have fed, all those things will be captured, and you will be provided with a password, and this pen drive will come to your hand. Fine. Suppose you fill up your document. There is a document, you fill this document. Now, I mean, you have filled up all the columns. Now you have to sign the document. At the time of signing the documents, instead of putting a signature, insert the pen drive. It will ask for a password, which will be given to you. If you enter the password, it means you have signed the document. So they will say the moment you enter the password, at the end where the signature column appears, it will say digitally signed. It will put a mark. This is document is digitally signed. So this password is unique, which is given to the authorized signature, which must be kept safely. So that is digital. And they will offer a certificate once along with this digital signature pen drive. You will be given a digital signature certificate, because there is no other way to check whether you have a digital signature. You have a hardware which you cannot produce as a proof. So MCA, they give a certificate that such and such company has been authorized to sign digitally. So these are all the requirements, documents which are required from the partner's angle, right? This is for registering a LLP. Where am I registering? I'm registering with ROC. I'm registering with ROC, submitting all these documents with ROC. Before getting all these documents, the only thing I should go for is, I should go for digital signature, go for GST. I've given the gst.gov.in. You go again, you go fill up all those forms, get the GST registration. Again, similarly, designated partner identification, designated partner identification, DPIN number. Again, you go to RO's website, fill up all those things. They will give a authorized identification number. So after all doing all these things, again go to ROC, submit all these documents. These are the documents required from the partner's point of view. Then there are some other documents which are also required. We'll see what are. Let's go through this. Yeah, because this will give an idea of. Hello.
Yes, sir.
Am I visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Fine, fine. Listen. Registration, no formal registration. If it's a sole proprietary, you don't go and register anywhere. If it's a sole proprietary, you don't go and register anywhere at all. Only thing is you may have to you may be required to register with, even that is not mandatory even as of now, with the district industry center. If you go, they will give a registration certificate. They call provisional registration certificate. Once you start the company, when it goes on stream, they will give a permanent registration certificate. Even that is not mandatory for a proprietary concern. Fine. But we do for every company, every proprietary company, every proprietary concern is expected to register because of some other reasons, not for the legal compliance. Fine. Registration is optional. Now, are we in partnership? I say registration is optional. That means, can any partnership company go for functioning without registration? Yes, legally it is so. But from other aspects, from other angle, you have to go for registration with the registrar of firms. Is it confusing? Is it confusing?
The partnership company is also registered with the MCA?
They have no partnership. They register with the registrar of firms.
Firm, okay.
Firms,
okay.
firm they are separate. Okay. But even that is not mandatory. That why I'm saying is, let's say what is a contract? Let's say 2 persons enter into a contract. Is it necessary that it must be registered? Law says it's not required. But when you run into problems, you cannot, if you want to produce this as an evidence, then problem comes.
We don't have legal validity.
We don't have legal validity.
We cannot, each parties cannot show.
Yeah, right? Yes. That's the reason we go for registration. Fine. So LLP, they register with Ministry of Corporate Affairs and the LLP Act. Then private limited company, of course, they register with Ministry of Corporate Affairs under Companies Act. Act the marudu. Otherwise, they are the same. Legal status, as I already told you. Now, in proprietary, the taxation is he is taxed as an individual. Like look at the income tax applicable for an individual. That is what is applicable for a proprietary concern for taxation for taxing the proprietor. Whereas in partnership and LLP and private limited company, of course, the Income Tax Act provides different slabs. According to those slabs, the taxes will be applicable. Fine. Then now let us, I'll discuss one important topic called non-disclosure agreement. Non-disclosure agreement. I'll see this before. Wait a minute. Yeah. What's a non-disclosure? Can anyone guess what's a non-disclosure agreement? This is meant for a startup, not for normal course of business. This NDA does not arise. Can anyone tell me what's a non-disclosure agreement? Can anyone tell me? Any idea? What's a non-disclosure agreement? Yeah. See.
So the contract.
Yes. Come out. It's a contract.
It won't be disclosed to public.
Yes. To anybody. See, listen. You know, a startup is the technology is new. It's innovative. Whether it's a service or a product, it's something which is a secret, isn't it? You innovate something, and you put your stake in it. You must take out your money back. You have to struggle, get the market. So the technology or whatever confidential information should not be leaked to others, isn't it? You are going to employ people. you're going to discuss with your auditors, whomsoever you are going to deal with in your normal business transaction, whether he is your employee or your customer, he may be your raw material supplier, he may be your dealer, whosoever it is. Whenever you feel that there's a threat from that, this person may be aware of the technology, though not in full, he may know what we are doing, then he should not be a threat for you. You should not go and disclose, at least not in totality, at least to some extent, to whatever extent he knows. You should not go and discuss this technology and disclose the technology to your competitors or to anybody else. Right? So you enter into a NDA, non-disclosure agreement certificate, with whomsoever you feel. Let's see what is it. The parties determine. Let us see. Between themselves, information deemed confidential between themselves. So with whom I should enter into, it's up to you. If you feel that such and such person with whom I deal is likely to acquire my technology, or some idea about my technology, and if you feel that he may turn out to be a threat, enter into NDA, non-disclosure agreement. So this will help in case, of course, these are all protections. Suppose you have an NDA agreement. With, let's say, with your employee. Fine. You have an NDA agreement with them, and he goes and somehow, without your knowledge, he discloses your technology to somebody else, and you come to know that the competitor comes out. He may not come out with the same product technology, but of course he will try to do something here and there to make it appear to be something new. But definitely it's a threat for you, it's the competitor. Now, in such cases, if you come to know that such and such person is disclosed, then there's a legal recourse available to you to sue that person. So that threat will make him not to disclose. That's how it acts. What will happen if you disclose? Then it's a legal battle. Of course, it's always a very long fought battle, right? So at least the threat of getting legally sued may prevent anyone to disclose. Is that clear? So that should be done. That NDA agreement is a special precaution to be taken by startups. Now, how to do it? You put it. There is no format available. You describe in whatever legal terms you want to. They consult a person who is legally sound, who is technically sound. So sit together, then draft an agreement, get it signed, and it must be signed using, again, as similar to any agreement, any contract, not necessary to be registered. But again, if you want to take it as an evidence, produce this as an evidence to any court, it must be stamped. So normally you do it in a 20 to 100 rupees. The law says, depending on the state in which you are, the startup is there. In Tamil Nadu, the registration fee required is 100 rupees. Of course, it varies from state to state. Now here it is 100 rupees. Now it should be executed in a non-judicial stamp paper. Any idea of what is a non-judicial stamp paper? Can anyone? Because these are all the things which every business owner or even every MBA student should be aware of. There are two stamp papers. What's a stamp? What's the idea of collecting a stamp by the government? They after provide you, this becomes an evidence, a document which can be produced before any court. A document which is written and signed, if it is not stamped, it retains its legal status. But if the other party contests, then it cannot stand as an evidence. If the other party agrees, then it will stand as evidence. Fine. Suppose you enter into an agreement, NDA agreement with somebody, and he agrees, yes, I have signed this document, then it will definitely a valid document. But nobody will agree, isn't it? When it comes to court, nobody will agree. Say. So is that to overcome that, it must be stamped. Is that clear? And any contract for that matter is signed. There are two types of stamping. Yeah, this is your non-judicial stamp paper. I think you would have seen this stamp paper. Whatever, when you buy a land, what is the stamp paper on which you write the document? This is non-judicial because it's a contract. So one person buys, another person sells. So that's a contract. So any legal transaction which is not pertaining to a dispute, where you put your version, the other person put his version, the court intermediates and then decides, all other things are non-judicial. Fine, non-judicial stamp paper. If at all you go to a court, you put a, because we don't call it as a judicial stamp paper. We in India we call it as a court fee. It will be like this: you write on a paper, then buy this stamp and affix on it. This is judicial stamp paper or court fee. Now, as far as we are concerned, the NDA agreement should be drafted on a non-judicial stamp paper. Is it clear? For that matter, this is applicable for any contract. And even in India, this was one, even in Tamil Nadu, this was once 20 rupees. The stamp paper was considered enough. Now recently they have amended it to rupees 100. Fine. Then can anyone tell me what else? Suppose I want to prepare a NDA agreement. I sit together and discuss with my lawyer what are the conditions I can put. Discuss with my technical person because he will know the technology. So we come to a consensus, draft the agreement. You sign as the startup owner and get it signed by your employees or with whomsoever you want to get it done. Is there anything that I need to do? We have prepared the document, signed by both the parties concerned. Is there anything that is need to be done? I don't go and register with somebody. I keep, suppose I prepare and duplicate. I may give one copy to him. I will retain one copy with me. That's all. No registration. Government collects a fee of 100 rupees to the service that it is going to offer in future when you are going to produce this as an evidence. That's the reason for which they collect this fee. With that, the job is done. You don't go to a register office and then file this as a document and get it registered. It's not that. Now, what I want to tell you is, ask you is, can anyone tell me, is there any other precaution, or again, this is again a legal requirement for that matter for any contract or any agreement? So that is also applicable for NDA. Apart from, let me ask the question straight away. Apart from the document getting signed by the two parties concerned, is there anything else to be done? That any
Sir, there might be witnesses.
Very good. It must be witnessed. It must be witnessed. So any contract without witness, it becomes invalid. It becomes invalid because the other party can claim that this has been done under threat, under force. Right? He has threatened me to sign this document. Now, how will you prove that you have not done that? The reason for witness comes because there's a third party who stands as a witness to the transaction. Nothing of that sort has happened. Both of them agree between themselves and then sign the document. That is the role of the witness. So any document, and again, these things are all very subtle things. But without a witness, is a document valid? Yes, it is valid. But the other person can contest. I have signed, but under threat. Then it goes, because when the mutual consent is absent, then court can decide in the favor of the other person. So that's the reason any document should be witnessed. And if you ask lawyers, they will say, don't get one witness, get two witnesses to be on the safer side. So if you go to any government office, any bank, they will ask for two witnesses, right? And preferably, this will add strength to your document. Preferably, the person who is standing as a witness should not have any financial interest in the subject matter. This is not applicable for startup. This is applicable for any contract which is written and signed. The person who is standing as a witness should not have any financial interest in the subject matter, right? Is that clear? Suppose you prepare an NDA agreement and you sign. The other side, let's say your supplier of raw material, he signs. If you want to take the witness of another supplier who supplies some other raw material to you, I think this may again turn out, this can be contested. This can be contested because the other person has got some financial transactions with you. So the other party who he can contest that, yes, even though the document is witnessed, this witness is under the influence of that person because they have got a financial interest, financial stake. Are you getting it? Is that clear? So go for a witness who is not in any way connected with this, but he should be aware of what is going on. He should not have any financial interest in the subject matter. So these are all common things to be seen. Yes, it cannot, it will not be, it will not stand as an evidence. So Indian Stamp Act says it must be stamped, only then it can be produced as an evidence. Is that clear? Can you go ahead? Yeah. Of course, these are all common contracts, eligibility of a contract, over 18 years of age, sound mind, not under the influence of drug, not to a party. This is what I say, not to a party who is who has got any financial interest in the dog. This is the common rule, not only for this, for that matter, any contract should be rightly witnessed. I will use the word rightly witnessed. Don't take the witness of anyone casually, right? Because it won't stand the test of law. Fine. Then another point is IPR. The moment you say your product is innovative one, it must be protected, isn't it? One is you go for NDA. This is what you can do from your side. From the promoter side, you get an NDA agreement. But from the government side, you can take the help using IPRs. So what is that you do? IPR comes to rescue in case there is somebody who is knowingly or unknowingly copying your idea or coming out even with an idea similar to you without knowing that you already have implemented the idea. This can also happen. This can also happen. Not that we cannot rule out that the other person may be very genuine. He may be also working on a product, but come out with a product which is similar to you in your in nature. It can always happen. So such things can be given protection through IPR. Is that clear? Is that clear? Now, now the first thing is clear. Suppose you have a product, you have registered it, you have either patented it. Let's see, let's go what is patent, what is trademark, what is copyright. Suppose let's say I have patented a product. You are a startup entrepreneur, you have patented a product. It gives a protection that, yes, nobody else, because if somebody else wants to do this, then if you come to know, you can always take recourse to law because your product is already patented. Right? Now, suppose somebody comes out with a product which is similar to the one or identical to the one that you have produced. You have patented it already, but you are not aware of somebody who is coming out with the same product, identical product. How is the threat getting eliminated? Let us say the other person is very genuine. He's not copying your product. He's 100% genuine. But somehow accidentally he'll end up with the same product as you have developed. Then what will happen? He will go for registering his product as a patent. He will go for patent for his product. Then the patent office will find out, yes, a similar product already exists. So you cannot grant patent. Is that clear? The protection comes that way. Hold on a minute. Yeah, sorry. So that is how patenting your product helps. Fine. Is that clear? Am I clear? You want some more discussion on that?
Clear.
Yeah. Even the other person may be very genuine in this. In fact, if you're I think, have you come across the in network technique? Network technique. Of course, this is nothing related to patent. Have you seen the CPM and PERT? Have you studied CPM and PERT? Critical path method. Hello.
Students, please tell me.
Have you studied CPM PERT, critical path method, program evaluation review technique?
No, sir.
No, not yet. Achha. So this is a project management methodology where you put all your activities in the form of a chart and identify the critical path and try to evaluate the time required. A technique used called program evaluation review technique. This was done accidentally by two different professors, one in Russia, erstwhile USSR, and another professor in USA. Both of them are working parallelly, and they may not be knowing each other, but they came out almost of the similar at the same point of time. They came out with the same type of technique. So why I'm saying is, whenever something there is some innovation, it is likely, though the probability is less, it is likely that somebody else may also come out with almost a similar or identical product. So in such cases, if we go for a patent, it helps you. Now let's see what is the difference: patent, trademark, copyright. Of course, each one is falling under a different act: Patent Act, Trademark Act, Copyright Act. Let's not worry about it. Now this gives, look at the protection it offers for patent. It gives inventions that are novel, original, and have industrial utility. Only then it is patentable. It is novel, original, and industrial utility. It has got some application, some use. Suppose I design a product which has got no use, but it is novel, original, I cannot get a patent. It must have some application from the consumer point of view, some utility value. That is patent. Again, under go below, it has got a right for 20 years. Once it is patented, nobody can infringe upon it for a period of 20 years. Is it clear? After that, it becomes free to everybody. Anybody can copy it. You cannot still go and claim your right. Once the validity period expires, it becomes a public property. Anybody can do that. So by that time, of course, you would have earned your taken back your investment, and even you might have yourself sold your patent to somebody else for a price. All these things can happen. Okay, then it's a territorial right. Patenting is a territorial right, which means if you register in one country, this protection is available only in that particular country. Right? In another country, you cannot go and claim. Suppose in another country, somebody comes out by copying your product, comes out with another identical product, you cannot claim right over it. So if at all you want a protection, you should go and register it in every country wherever you perceive that there's a possibility. So it's a territorial right. Come to trademark. This is not here. It's not a product. Nothing novel original product. It's a question of name that makes your brand distinct from others. Maybe in the form of shape, color, logos, slogans, whatever it is. You give a color to your product. No, when I say color, I mean subjectively. You give a unique identity to your product by way of logo, by way of shape, so that it will get registered in the minds of the people. That is trademark. Again, the validity is 10 years. Of course, after 10 years, if you want, you can go for every 10 years, you can go for a renewal. Again, this is a territorial right. If you want to file, if you want to protection in other countries, you should go and file in that country also. But there are other provisions. I'm talking about the base. The question may arise, do I need to go and register in every country, every single country? There are not necessary. There are ways by which many countries can be covered in one application. So those things I'm not touching all those things. But the objective is, if you want protection in more than one country, it is not enough if you file only in India. You should cover other countries as well. But copyright, of course, is not relevant for our discussion, but still it falls under IPR. I have given this. This is for literary works, painting works, artistic works, all those things. They come under copyright, and that is valid for the lifetime of the author, the producer, plus 60 years after his passing away. So that is the strength of copyright. Fine. Because it involves a lot of time, and the act gives protection for mental work, purely mental work, right? The protection is available. So suppose I say this is 20 years, I say this is 10 years, I say this is 60 years. This is if I want to retain this protection till such period. Suppose I feel, yes, I have started a product, I have started a company. Now I'm already 10 years old. Do I need to hold it? No, it's up to you. Okay, if you want to sell your patent to anybody, you can sell it in the market. You because you are the owner. It's something like a product, it's intellectual property, something like a property. You can sell this subject to the agreeable terms and conditions between the buyer and the seller. So not necessarily you should hold this patent forever. Fine. It all depends on the business conditions. Then now, if you go for registration, now normally patent registration takes a long time. Even if Indian situation, it takes about 2 to 3 years. Shortest possible time is about 2 or 3 years for a patent to get registered. The reason is that, again, if you go to a court, the court takes an enormous time for decision, taking decision. What's the reason for that? What's the reason for that? Why do you come across cases? See, the cases are contested for 10 years, 20 years, 30 years. Especially in India, the situation is the time taken is too large in any court. What is the reason? The logic or the thinking behind is that I should not punish a person who is innocent. Is that clear? An innocent should not get punished, even if a person who has committed something wrong, if he can go unpunished, but I should not punish innocent. So that's why courts take a very long time to decide things. Now, similarly, in patent, suppose you file a patent with the patent office, they have to call for, even though in spite of all softwares available, the patent officials, they are not technicians, they are not technically sound people, isn't it? Even though they are engineers, they may be specialized in one particular field, whereas may come up in a field which is totally unknown to them, totally unfamiliar to them. Now, how to rely on the application? So they wait, call for, make public announcements, give time, give a notice that such and such patent has come for registration. Is there anybody who has already done this? Is there anybody is there anyone who has got an objection for this? So they'll keep publishing, wait for time, give sufficient time. Then if at all they receive any objection, they have to go through it. So it takes its own course of time. Of course, not less than 2 years. But a startup cannot wait for 2 years, which is the short, which is the minimum time possible. Sometimes even it takes more than 5 years, 6 years. People have been waiting. Now, a startup cannot wait for protection for a period of 5 years, because he has to get his money back, isn't it? During this period of 5 years, when the patent application is pending, if somebody else comes in and with a similar product, then everything will go into things will collapse, isn't it? So all such difficulties which startups face, where startups are facing, were discussed, and they were somehow, in some form or the other, they were provided some facilitation in the Startup India. So there it comes. So in Startup India, there's a SIPP, Startups Intellectual Property Protection. So they give, if a company is a startup, not necessarily they should go and directly file an application for the Register of Patents. They can go through SIPP, right? SIPP is a part of Startup India, where they will assist. There are facilitators, right? They will take care. It's like an advisory role. They offer this advisory service and try to see that your registration is getting done at a faster rate. So these are also advantages of. So is it mandatory that one should register in a Startup India? Not necessary. Not necessary. Not legally. Not legally binding that one should go and register in a Startup India as a startup. But still, if you want to avail certain, not only this, we'll see what are all the other benefits which are eligible, to enjoy once you register as a eligible startup. Fine. So this SIPP is one potential area, one potential platform where those who want to register their patent, they can apply through this. Of course, this we have discussed. This is, as I told you, is a fast track application, and there's a fee waiver. In fact, patents they charge a heavy fee. You got 80% fee waiver. This I'm saying why should it be, this is the reason why should one get registered with the Startup India? Even without registration with Startup India, if you have registered with ROC as a LLP, then it is enough. You can go ahead with, you can claim yourself as a startup, you can go ahead. But if you want some recognition, you go for Startup India and register. In addition to SIWP, you get other benefits like, yes, look at them. To reduce the regulatory binding on burden on startups, thereby allowing them to focus on their core business. This is their objective. So they are allowed to self-certify compliance of 6 labor laws and 3 environmental laws through a simple online process. This is a very, very great facility provided to startups once you register with SI with Startup India, which means every company has to follow certain laws, especially labor laws and environmental laws. We'll see what are they. Suppose, let's say labor law, right? You should not employ much child labor. You should not, if your number of employees is more than this, you should file for, you should set aside for EPA, their Provident Fund, ESI, all those things. Fine. And there should not be any condition, health hazard, right? You should not provide an environment which is, you should provide an environment which is conducive to their well-being, all such things. Suppose you don't come under startup, if you don't register, you don't get protection from these laws. So anybody can enter into a premise and go for verification, right? You are open to this. So a factory inspector can enter your factory and check your records and check physically anything for compliance. So once you fall under this, you are given protection. You can self-certify. You can certify every year that I don't employ child labor, or I pay my PF and ESI on time. So it's a self-certification process. Once you self-certify, the legal requirement or normal requirement of somebody coming and inspecting your factory, you overcome that. Fine. Then this next one is your fast track application for patenting with a fee waiver. Then 3 years consecutive income tax waiver exemption. So these are all the benefits once you register yourself as an eligible startup with Startup India portal. Is that clear? So that's why everyone who's really a startup, now they go for registration, and it's a database for the government. Then we said there is a venture capitalist. They are the people who are funding. From the government's point of view, this is SIDBI's fund of funds. The Small Industries Development Bank of India, they have set up a fund for, it's a venture fund, which again, if you want to avail, you can through Startup India, you can go and put your application, submit your application. If they are convinced, they may even come out with funding in your projects. Then easy winding up procedures. I don't go deep into winding up. That itself is a very big topic. So normally, when if it is a limited company, private limited company, winding up takes time. Now you don't start off as a limited company. You go for, the suggestion is to go for a LLP. It is similar to in nature. It is similar to a limited company because of the limited liability. So the winding up procedures are huge. Now here, let us discuss something more on this. Let us come out of. So why should the winding up procedure takes a long time? I'm not going to touch the legal formalities to be complied with, but in general, a limited company, if you want to wind up, a private limited company, let's say, it takes a long legal process. Whereas a partnership, you can wind it up just like that. If all the partners agree, they can write a dissolution deed, go and file it with the registrar of firms. That is it. It's done. Why is it so? The reason is, in a private limited company, the director's liability is limited, isn't it? So they should not go scot-free. They should not cheat somebody else and then wind up the company and go scot-free. That's the reason. Whereas even when a partnership company is wound up, when it is dissolved, the partners are individually liable because there's a personal liability. Are you with me? Are you with me? In partnership, the partners are personally liable. Right? They cannot say that the business has failed, so I'm not able to pay. They are personally liable. They have to pay from their own sources, from whatever other income they have. other asset they have to dispose of and pay it. Otherwise, legal options are available for the lenders, for the creditors. So those things are not available for a private limited company. That is why winding up takes a long time. So if you start a LLP, normal LLP without a startup, let's say, winding up is again difficult. If it's a startup, an LLP, and register with Startup India, the winding up procedures are simplified. Those who want to know further, please go to the website. You'll get to know. Yeah, some of the acts which I said, which are the acts which from which you can simply self-certify. Look at them: Employment Act, Trade Act, Payment of Gratuity Act, PF Act, Contract Labor Act. See, for everything there is an administrative mechanism. Government can, any labor inspector can enter your premise and go for verification. So it's a nuisance, right? A startup is meant to strengthen the economy. I must give some support, some encouragement. So you self-certify, right? Once you are, once you have been given a certificate, eligible startup certificate, you can self-certify. Whatever be the forms available, you download, fill up, and self-certify that yes, I am complying with all these. So that's an advantage.
So the self-certification cannot be audited, sir?
Not necessary at all.
Not
necessary at all.
Sir, is it, suppose to get the legal validity, the both partners have to write a partnership deed, and that is compulsory?
Yes. See, LLP, suppose it's a limited liability partnership. LLP will discuss who are the partners, what is their stake, financial stake, right? Somebody can put financial stake and stay back. Somebody can involve working partner, his working partner as well as a financial partner. Somebody can be simply a financial partner. All those things are put in the document. Plus, there must be also an authorized person, because you are not going to get digital signature for all the partners. You must authorize one person who is going to sign on behalf of it, something like your company seal. On behalf of your company, such and such partner is going to sign the documents using digital signature. So that authenticates, right? Suppose who is going to self-certify? The person who is the authorized signatory is going to self-certify. So it binds. It is binding.
Any one of the partner is the authorized
signatory. Who is shown as authorized signatory in the deed, in the partnership deed.
In the digital signature, sir.
In the partnership deed. Partnership deed. Say how will a partnership deed look like? There are 4 partners. So partner 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes. Normally, even before this digital signature and all came into picture, they used to call a managing partner. Have you come across the word managing partner? And the deed will authorize the managing partner to sign all the documents on behalf of the partnership deed. If it is so, then it is binding on the other partners. If the other partners cannot say no without more knowledge, he has signed, because they agree and authorize him to sign. Now, after the introduction of this digital signature, now instead of managing partner, they say the authorized signatory. So and so is the authorized signatory on who can sign all legal documents on behalf of the partnership. So he can go and sign the documents.
Suppose if 3 or 4 of them are the partners in an LLP company, if one of them wants to come out of the business, or one of them wants to retire from the business.
Yes, it is always. It is allowed. It is allowed. It is allowed.
Oh.
Within the partner. Yeah, tell me. Yeah.
Or the terms and conditions of partnership, and how long they will be continuing business, everything.
It is all left to the partners. See, partnership is it's a private deal. It's a private deal. So leave alone LLP. Let us think of a simple partnership. It is my will and pleasure. Suppose 4 of us start a business. After 1 year, we 3 are okay, and 1 person we are not happy with 1 person. Right? Now you sit together, discuss. Of course, it's a one-to-one discussion. If he has put some money, whether suppose the business has earned something, what is his share? Give it, leave him. We call it as a dissolution deed or modification deed. Once you come to a consensus, you can go and file a modification deed in the register of firms. 4 partners now becomes 3 partners. Right.
So the company can continue under the same name.
Yes, and the same name,
Oh.
But for that means once a partner is relieved from the partnership, he is absolved of the liabilities. Is it clear? So the remaining partners who are relieving them, they must be very sure that in future they are not going to ask him for anything.
So they are all personally liable.
They are personally liable. The remaining three partners are personally liable.
Okay.
The remaining, see, this is what your question is very interesting. Suppose it happens. It happens. Suppose there are 4 persons join as partners. They continue their business. Right? As I already told, one partner is 3 are good, one is not good, or one wants to go away from the partnership. As long as the partnership firm has not borrowed any money, there is no issue. All the 4 can sit together and decide to leave one partner away. He can go away. Only thing is they should form a deed, register with the registrar of companies, file for a firm registration certificate. The firm registration certificate now will say one partner has gone away. The remaining 3 partners continue from this date. Yes. Now, once this is done, this partner who has gone out of the business, he is not personally liable because he is no more a partner. Right? But if the 3 partners, they must be very sure by relieving them, our interests are not getting affected. They should be very sure. They should be very sure. But it happens, suppose this company has borrowed money from a bank, let us see. 4 partners, they jointly executed a document with the bank. Then they were running the business, borrowed some money. Now there's some dispute, one partner wants to go away. Fine. Now comes, suppose as I already done, 3 parts they discuss, they relieve one partner, that must be authenticated by the bank. Otherwise, the registration or dissolution deed will be invalid. Why? It happens. Suppose there are 4 partners. 2 of them are very strong financially. They have got a lot of good net worth. The business is running into a loss. Now they find a shortcut for this. They form a dissolution deed, relieve the 2 financially strong partners out, ask them to go out, permit them go out, stating that they were some due to such and such reasons they don't want to continue. When we are agreeable, they relieve them. The remaining 2 partners, they continue the business. They have borrowed money. There's a huge due. They are not able to repay. What will the bank do? They will come and ask the two partners, but their net worth is very poor. Our bank is put into trouble. They cannot, isn't it? That's why when there is an outside liability, especially from an institutional liability, if it's a private creditor, it makes no, of course they can go scot-free. If it is an institutional liability, the institution has to approve any release of part. Otherwise, even the firm,
they have to get the approval from the
they have to get the approval from the bank or from the financial institution for the release. It is not mere consent of the existing partners is not sufficient, because they can circumvent like this. 2 partners are very strong financially.
Based on that only they have lended the money and
they have earned, the business has done profit, but they have shown us a loss. And 2 partners release the 2 partners. The left out partners are with very poor net worth. Bank can go against the personal guarantee, but they don't have any money. What will they do?
Yes.
That's the reason.
Okay.
And the act provides, suppose, this is for the sake of general understanding. Suppose you are a lender, bank is a lender, right? Let us assume that the bank has given money to a proprietor based on his net worth. Fine. The businesses end up in a loss, right? The bank, he has also lost his money. For the liability, the size of the liability, the net worth is now very poor. Let's say the net worth can cover only 20% or 30% of the liability, right? Even if the proprietor is not interested to part away with his properties, bank can legally enforce, sell his property in auction, take the money. Fine. But they have realized only 20% of the money. Now the proprietor is, of course, with zero net worth. He has got nothing else to offer. Bank has already taken whatever is left out. What will the bank do? There is only one person available from whom they can recover. And the bank has already recovered whatever money he has, even though this is not offered as a security. Bank can attach any property, any jewel or money, whatever it is, they can attach. They have recovered money, let's say through legal course. In spite of it, there is a substantial amount left out. The bank is at a loss.
Yes.
The maximum thing that they can do is law provides, yes, he can be imprisoned. That's all. Depending on the size of liability, court can offer, because he has got no money, nothing to offer, has become zero. Court can give an imprisonment. That's all.
Yes.
He will go to jail and spend 2 years, 3 years, come out. Then he becomes free of any liability. He becomes free of liability. He has enjoyed the punishment by way of imprisonment. No need for him to repay them. So that's why in partnership banks will be very cautious in not allowing any partner to retire.
Okay, sir.
Yeah, we have diverted somewhere, but anyway,
Yes,
good.
anyway, thank you, sir. Thank you. So we'll.
Okay. Can an existing business entity register itself as a partner? Because I was not aware of this Partnership India and all. Sorry, Startup India and all. Where I was doing my business as a startup. Yes, because they are given a 10 years. If you look at the earliest I told, the period was not more than 10-year-old. We can go and register, provided we meet the requirements. I think that is all about your normal way of your legal aspects, which are specific to
Topic.
startups. Let's see something about the ethical aspect. I don't think there is anything special about startups. Whatever ethical aspect of business that one wants to do is applicable for similar to any other business. Can anyone tell me what is ethical? Anything which is non-ethical, isn't it? Let's see. I'll put it in a simple way. You are towards your investors. How you do a business ethically towards your investors, timely repayment of interest, timely repayment of principal. That means maintaining your records properly, correctly. Don't underquoting your income, right? Don't overquoting your expenditure. This is all being done, But see, one businessman should act according to his conscience. There's no law will come and dictate. No law can be dictated. Do this, do that. But time will take its course. So suppose you do a business in an unethical way, I think somehow maybe you can be free for some time, but somehow it will, when it comes to the knowledge of your stakeholders, I think you will be losing your credibility in the market. That's how you are getting punished. Towards employees, of course, fair treatment, payment of wages in time, complaints of statutory payments, ESI, PFs. You collect from your employees, but don't pay it to the PF office, right? And you don't pay your contribution to the PF office. These are all happening in small industries. This is not necessarily for startups, for any business. It must be ethical, right? What will happen? Suppose you don't pay, you collect and you don't pay. What will happen? Suppose an employee retires or he resigns and goes away from the business, from your company, then he comes to know that though you have been promising to pay to PF, you have not paid. If he raises a complaint, then all these are statutory bodies. All these government organizations, they are statutory. Their due is called crown due. What about the word? CROWN, crown due. And the காலத்துல king's due ன்னு சொல்லுவாங்க, crown due. Any due to the king, that is the foremost importance, right? They can, law provides for recovery of crown dues by whatever way it is possible. So they can come and attach in your property and take away if you have not paid your PF in time, right? Then towards government, whatever be the ethical way, following the rules, correct declarations. I told you, you self-declare. Suppose you have a child employee in your organization and declare that you don't have a child employee, right? The act provides for self-declaration. Suppose a complaint goes from your own employees, such and such company has self-declared that there is no child employee, but there are. Then, of course, government has got every right to come and inspect. Then you lose all your credibility. You become, you suppose you are debarred from as a startup. Then that's all. Once for all, you lose your credibility.
Yes.
Fine. So always doing ethical. So ethics is a base. Not somebody should enforce on me. I should do it. Towards the customers, of course, right product, timely service, right pricing, timely service. Of course, you give a lot of promise, but don't do that. Warranties, normally we give in fine print warranties, isn't it? So those are all ethical. So if you want your customers to know what is the warranty that you are giving. It must be even there were disputes. The warranty should be legible. It should be readable. It should be readable, right? You should not put in such a fine font that no customer will read it. Fine, it must be that. These are all ethical way of doing. Otherwise, you are indirectly cheating the consumers. Then towards unfair trade practices. What is an unfair trade practice? Yes, you charge a different price to different consumers, right? Your competitor, suppose your cost of production is, let's say, 10 rupees. You want to push some competitors away from the market. You have already accumulated sufficient reserve. Let's say, let me sell my product at 9 rupees for 6 months, so that this fellow will run out of the market. Then I will increase. So these are all unethical ways of doing business, right? Yes. So there is nobody is overseeing from the top whether you are doing it right or wrong, but your self-conscience should teach a lesson. You should give the instruction. You should take the instruction from your conscience and do business. Fine. Are we on time or?
Yes, sir. We are on time. And can we?
Yeah.
Do you have any other slides, sir, or can we give some time for interaction with the?
Yeah. You can.
So, students, thanks for a patient listening, and it's all highly informative. Sir, can you share your slides for the benefit of students?
Yeah. I'll send it.
Thank you, sir. And the session is open for interaction. Students, IAC champions.
Who are they? IAC champions. Institutional Innovation. What is it?
Institutions Innovation Council, sir.
Innovation Council.
Institutional Innovation Council. So make this. Any questions, students? Make it fast. We already, I think, we are running against time, but the session is interesting.
See, go through some. See, there are the innovative products being developed. There are many, very many products. Go through them. It will ignite interest in you to do something in case you want to do anything new. Simple technology, right? There are so many products which are not known to us even. Okay. There are many products.
Sir, okay, right. Fine. So students, Sanjay is there. Sanjay, AC champions. Venkatesh Prabhu.
Sir.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, be relaxed.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Yeah. Tell me.
So, what is the procedure to convert LLP to private limited company? And according to you, what is the right stage to do it, sir?
See, that's why I told you in the beginning itself, we are not experts.
Yes, sir.
As far as company law is concerned, as far as legal aspects are concerned, you should know that it is possible to convert. That's all. I have given you right. Then
yes, sir.
I gave I think I gave a rule, company law as per section such and such. Okay. So
Venkatesh, can you switch on your video?
Approach. See, that's why I told you that there are people who are specialists in every field. So I cannot be a specialist in everything. Or even by reading the rule book, go to I said as per section such and such, there is a provision for converting. You go and read these sections, but not that. Then there will be. It is not that you can simply go and follow those rules and do it, because every job has got its own. What shall I say? Suppose I cannot be a carpenter. I know how to plane what is carpentry, but I cannot be a carpenter. Similarly, that's why there are people, there are specialists. Go to a company secretary. Go to a company secretary or to a lawyer who is especially devoted to company affairs. Fine?
Okay, sir. Yes, sir.
But you should know that it is possible. That's all. Then suppose how do you form a private limited company? You write your articles of association, memorandum of association. If you take the textbook, see what are the contents in articles, what are the contents in memorandum. You yourself can write, but still you will land into trouble. Get it better through somebody who is in the field, because there are finer aspects which we may not be knowing really. Strictly speaking, I may not know. It is like going to a counter and buying over-the-counter medicine and taking medicine for illness. It is similar. So that's why I have skipped many issues, because as a student, you should be aware what are all the provisions available. You are
Okay, sir.
you are a management student, not a lawyer, right? Don't think
Yes,
that I'm defending, because we are not a lawyer, and a lawyer, especially, I don't say law again is a very big domain. It's a civil law, criminal law. Again,
Yes.
in civil law, somebody is exclusively dealing with the transfer of property, somebody exclusively dealing with company affairs, because it is so wide, so big, so complicated, so intricate, that only an expert guidance is good, and they don't charge you very heavily. Maybe they may charge you 1,000 rupees for an article or a memorandum drafting and checking. That will solve a lot of problems.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Sir, can we take up a couple of questions, sir?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Swarnalata, are you there? Swarnalata. Okay. So, Kalimuthu. Divya. All given your names, and I'm for questioning, but Divya is there. Swarnalata, Divya, any questions? Niklesh is there. Sharumadi of first MBA. Varsha. Okay, we expect more interaction, but anyway, fine.
Why I'm
Sir?
saying, yeah. Well, I want to quote an example.
Yes, sir, please.
Because for the person who asked what is the provision for converting LLP into partner, in fact, when I was in income tax, I wanted to quote this example. Why I'm saying is because there are intricacies. I cannot be a master in every field. I was in valuation cell. We were asked to value properties. I was a civil engineer, mind it. So we were asked to value building, land, whatever complex, whatever it is, real estate, and we were valuing the properties. Fine, and always there will be a dispute. Suppose I say the property is worth 10 crores. The client may say no, he has to pay tax on it if it's a capital gain. He may claim this is only 5 crores, and this will go for arbitration. The arbitration, the judge will decide. It's an internal arbitration counter. Judge will decide on the value, and then he will decide whatever he says. He may say either it is 10 crores, yeah, he may reject, or he may decide yes, it is 5 crores only, and it's up to his judgment. And in one such case, we went for we valued a property, and in fact, our value was on the higher side, the client value was on the lower side. When it came for argument, the lawyer was very shrewd enough. He did not go into the intricacies of how it was valued. Mind it. He did not go into the valuation method. He said, he asked, in fact, we were two of us, we were in the tribunal. What's your qualification? I said, I'm a civil engineer. Okay. Then will you be able to value land and building? Yes. What type of land and building? Any residential, commercial, industrial, everything. These are the way, this is how they take words from you. Yes. Then this land was an agricultural land. Fine. This land was an agricultural land. He did not say this is an agricultural land, you are incompetent to value, because if he says that, it will prolong the discussion. He asked the judge, can a valuer of jewelry be competent enough to value a land? Ask his question. The judge says, no, he is not competent enough. He can value jewels, not land. Now, similarly, agricultural land cannot be valued, or a civil engineer is not competent enough to value an agricultural land. Yes, we have to agree. We have to agree to his, judge has to agree. Then he did not go into the plus and minus of the valuation. He said, yes, you are the competency, we lack competency. I agree with the client, then go for a reevaluation by a competent person. Why I'm saying is, there are finer aspects which only the experts will be able to point out, whether to defend or to argue for or against. Only a person who is in that field, you have to rely on his knowledge. Even for registration of companies or for any legal disputes, I cannot do it so moto on my own. I can only know that these are the provisions available. But when you really go, when you really want to handle it correctly, rely on the advice of an expert in the field. That's why.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much. And there is no question, so we'll wind up this session.
Thank you.
I invite Dharnesh Balaji. Are you there?
Yes, I am there.
Just a minute, Dharnesh Balaji. Wait for 1 minute. Sir, it's a very informative session. Thank you for spending your valuable time. And of course, due to some busy schedule and our director is not able to participate, but he conveys his regards to you.
Okay.
So thank you. On behalf of DJ Academy, faculty and students, I wholeheartedly thank you for spending more than 1.5 hours. Very informative session. But students, I think we expect more interaction. But anyway, we'll share the PPT, make use of it. And I will also, with his consent, I will share the LinkedIn connect of ID of sir, and you connect to him, and any questions you can message him, right? So he'll be always there for any ideas for startup of business or any clarifications. Okay, so Darish, please take over the session.
Yes, sir. So good evening to everyone present here. It's my privilege to propose a vote of thanks on this occasion. I, on behalf of DJ Academy of Managerial Excellence, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to our speaker, Dr. Nagarajan. Thank you, sir, for your thought-provoking and interesting speech. I wish to express my gratitude to our director, Dr. AGV Narayanan, for providing encouragement and support. I extend my sincere thanks to the teachers and non-teaching staffs for organizing the event. I further extend my wholehearted thanks to the students from our college. Once again, I thank all for your cordial cooperation. Thank you.
Thank you, Darish. Thank you all for spending your valuable time. Don't think that in the evening hour we make you to sit for more than 1 hour, 2 hours. But you see, in premium B schools, right, in IIMs or see, whenever the resource person is available, whenever they have time without affecting the academic classes, the session will be conducted even at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock. So anytime it will be conducted. So you should be also going to be a budding manager and ensure that whenever you have any meeting, in corporate meetings, they'll be calling at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, anytime they will call, right? So make yourself available to interact with the experts and come well prepared for the interaction for forthcoming sessions. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much once again.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.